working, trying to change things. But I don't work with the assumption that tomorrow, the next day, we will have the votes necessary, or my speeches will convert very many. I work on the assumption that this is a long-term process. The only way this can be turned around is to talk to the next generation. That's where I'm the most encouraged, because the college kids are responding most favorably with this message. And therefore, I have a tinge of optimism about this, but I think the heartache is yet to come. And I think our traditions will serve us well, because we have been the freest and the richest, and we knew something about sound money and property rights and contracts, and that's why we did prosper. So it won't be quite as bad as, say, the Soviet system when they collapsed, because they really didn't have the traditions of freedom and personal responsibility that we have. But it's still, we live in very precarious times, because it goes the other way, we're going to even lose a lot more of our freedoms.
Lord Monkton gave a speech recently about loss of sovereignty and the upcoming climate treaty, which will give up, I guess, U.S. sovereignty, in his words anyway. How disturbing, though, is it? Because I know you didn't have a chance to see that speech, but how disturbing is it to you when you see this slow evaporation of U.S. sovereignty over time? Because you mentioned to me that it really is piece by piece that you see this happening with various UN treaties or whatever it is we've been doing.
Yes, it's consistent and consistently eroding our sovereignty. I think that most of the sovereignty should remain with the individual and the family, and should be very, very local. And that's what was intended. The federal government was meant to be very small, and that has obviously changed dramatically. But now, I would say in the last 40 or 50 years, it's been gravitating to international government. Even with this financial crisis going on, they're talking about internationalizing all these regulations as well. I mean, if you look at the WTO is talking, about regulating all drugs and nutritional products, and the drug companies are all for this, and this is globalism, and this is all good. So this means it's giving up the responsibility of the individual for dealing with these problems, as well as our states, as well as our federal government. But that probably is one of the most serious problems that we have, because they may, right now, because they know the dollar is ending its supremacy, so what are they going to replace it with? And they're talking now, of course, with United Nations, the IMF, coming up with some type of a currency, a special drawing right or a basket of currency, and replace our Federal Reserve System. As bad as the Federal Reserve System is, at least we have the responsibility to deal with that. But if it goes to an international system, that won't be good for us.
Congress suspended the law, I think it was, prohibiting the use of U.S. troops on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens, and they are currently training a rather large force in Texas right now for potential use against U.S. citizens if there is social disorder. Is that something that worries you, Congressman Paul?
I think they're quite capable of doing that. As a matter of fact, that subject came up with a national emergency dealing with the flu, because those national powers do give the federal government power to round people up and force inoculations and all. So the potential is there, and governments have notoriously done it in the past. Right now, I can't say that I know of any schedule that they have for really invoking those kind of controls on the people.
When you look at today versus, I would go back to the 50s or something, I think we could use less than $1 of money printing to create maybe 66 cents or so and get $1 of GDP growth in the economy. That was when we were obviously very healthy, very industrialized. It was a very strong economy. But what is it taking today? Because I talk to some of the top people in the financial world each week, as you know, Congressman Paul, and I've heard some numbers that are very disturbing. Do you have any quantification of how many dollars it takes to create $1 GDP?
No, but it's a lot more than $1. I've seen it up as high as $5 or $6, but I don't know that figure for sure. Maybe it's difficult to actually calculate. Even the GDP figures, I've never been too excited about those, because government spending is part of the GDP. So if you build more airplanes and more tanks and more bullets, it actually contributes to the GDP, which is a farce too, because it actually should be subtracted, because it's taking money away from people's livelihood and maybe getting good medical care or better education or buying a house. So I don't see that as a good measurement.
In closing here, let me just ask you, Congressman Paul, the way that we're headed, obviously it's a train wreck. It's a potential collapse of the dollar. And as you said, we could have the nation fracture, I guess, potentially. You said you didn't know whether states would secede or not. But what in your mind is going to be the eventual outcome of this, because as Lord Monckton said, these communists have taken over everything and they're trying to force one world communistic government. I mean, it's almost a fight to enslave the people globally, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, there's at least some that'll do it, but I still believe that even like in Europe, as successful as it has seemed with the European Union, I still think that as times get tougher and the economies get weaker, there will be a revival of nationalism. I don't think that the French and the Germans and the British and all will just go along and be one unified government. So I think there will be a natural resistance even in this country. There are both liberals and conservatives for different reasons who object to some of these international trade agreements. Some are just against trade, but others are against the abuse of our sovereignty. So I don't know. I think that there is a good chance that we will wake up and improve things, but I don't believe it's going to happen without seeing a lot more poverty and a lot more violence in our city. The only question is what will be the prevailing philosophy of our country? Should the government be there to protect our liberties, or should the government be there to run our lives and run the economy and police the world? If we continue with that, we're in big, big trouble. But I'm just working on the assumption that we can convert enough people that when we do the rebuilding, we'll make it a much better place.
Then are you optimistic in the end, Congressman Paul?
I work on the fact that yes, I'm more optimistic on the long run. On the short term, I'm rather pessimistic.
And also, I just wanted to make a quick mention of the Campaign for Liberty and the job that Jesse Benton and others are doing over there. If people wanted to go and make a donation, what is the website for Campaign for Liberty?
That is campaignforliberty.com, and we'd welcome any help.
Also, Congressman Paul, your last book, The Revolution, was a #1 New York Times bestseller. Now you've just released End the Fed, a highly acclaimed book, and we will have a direct link on your interview page to that book, End the Fed, as well.
Of course, we'd welcome any help if anybody gets interested in buying the book, End the Fed.
What I'll do is I'll have a direct link on your interview page for the book and for Campaign for Liberty.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Paul.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us at KingWorldNews.com. Remember to tune in next week where we will have part 2 of Mish's interview. Also joining us will be Warren Adelman, president of GoDaddy, #1 in the world for website hosting. Also remember to go to our Gold Plus page for exclusive weekly interviews with Ted Butler and Gada.